everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Do Good to Lead Well podcast series. I'm your host, Craig Dowden. Really appreciate you taking your time out of your hectic schedules today to join us for this live conversation. I'm really excited to dig into this. This is a topic that applies to all of us at some point in our lives, and it's also one that I just find the lessons and the framework that we're about to discuss with Teresa Amabile just transcends. There's so many lessons we can take from this. Before we start that, though, I just want to express heartfelt gratitude to everybody who watches the live program, to those who engage in the podcast on Spotify and Apple. The origin story of the Do Good to Lead Well podcast really was in advance of my first book. And in my work, my keynote speaking work, my executive coaching work, I have the profound privilege to interact with global thought leaders, top CEOs. And what I wanted to do was open up that conversation to a wider forum so all of us could participate and learn from one another. And so because of your ongoing support, feedback, and social shares, Do Good to Lead Well has been in the top 0.5% of podcasts globally, which is truly extraordinary. And this could not have happened without you. And the main reason, and it's why I feel so fortunate, is because of the extraordinary guests that we've been able to welcome to our community and to the Do Good to Lead Well universe. And today is no exception. As soon as this was on the docket, I was so excited. You can see the book behind me. I cannot recommend this book enough. Every single one of you, I can guarantee, are going to take out some fantastic lessons from this. As you know, following the podcast, I love evidence-based insights, and there are fantastic, provocative questions for us to reflect on that we can mull over, consider, and really unpack wherever we are in our lives. So I'm excited to talk about this. Teresa Amabile is the Edsel Bryant Ford Professor of Business Administration at Harvard Business School and the author of the recently released and outstanding book that I just talked about, Retiring, Creating a Life That Works for You. Love the title and love the subtitle, which we're going to jump into. Originally educated as a chemist, Teresa received her doctorate in psychology from Stanford University. Her research encompasses creativity, productivity, innovation, and inner work life, the confluence of emotions, perceptions, and motivation that people experience as they react to events at work. And again, I would highly encourage you to check out all of her previous books. Her work is just absolutely insightful. Not surprisingly, her work has earned several awards, and I'm just going to name a couple. The Lifetime Achievement Award from the Academy of Management's OB Division, the Distinguished Scholar Award from the Society for Personality and Social Psychology. And in 2020, Teresa was named one of the top 50 scholars by citation count in business management. Like, just absolutely awesome. And why I'm so excited. And one cool little detail, which I don't know if I've shared this with you, Teresa, for my undergrad, I cited your work on creativity with children. And it was so awesome. And so what's been really fun for me is that from that time, I've loved following your work, and it's just been so impactful. And it's been fun. I cite it often in my coaching work and my speaking work. So it's a real extra special privilege to have you with me today.
Thank you so much, Craig. I so enjoy your podcast. I've enjoyed being on with you before, and I can't wait for this conversation today.
Yeah, this is awesome. And so for people who have joined the live conversation, this is one of the many benefits that you have. You can ask Teresa anything that you like over the next little while, and covering on retiring, the retirement transition. And maybe let's start there. What was the motivation behind you writing this book, Retiring, Creating a Life That Works for You? And perhaps what's really interesting, I love the purposeful selection of retiring. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, wow. There were two big motivations for me in undertaking this research, and then I was lucky enough to pique the interest of four fabulous colleagues, all academics in the Boston area, who joined me in this 10-year research project and writing project leading to the book. You had mentioned, Craig, my earlier research on the progress principle. That's the name of the book, or as you beloved Canadians would say, the progress principle. And our main finding, as you'll recall, in that research was that people have their best days at work, the days where they feel most engaged in what they're doing, where they have the most positive perceptions of their work, their organization, their colleagues, their leaders, and the most positive emotions. They have those experiences on days when they make progress in meaningful work.
Mm.
And that was a stunning finding, a very strong finding of that research. And it has a number of implications that we explored in that book, implications for leaders and how they manage in organizations. But there was another implication that we didn't deal with in that book. And that was, well, most professionals who have meaningful work, who are fortunate enough to have meaningful work, find that there will be a day when that meaningful work ends. What happens then? So that was the question that kept nagging at me as we, finished that research, as I spread the word, talked to various audiences, various leaders about that work. What happens when it's over?
Right.
And I went into the literature in psychology, organizational behavior, and I found a lot of research on retiring, but almost all of it focused on these two main conclusions.
Mm.
Health makes a lot of difference for decisions, attitudes, and experiences of retirement, and wealth makes a big difference for decisions and attitudes and experiences of retirement. Those are important findings for sure, but there wasn't anything much on what the experience of retiring is like. What are the challenges that people face aside from health and wealth as they go into that phase of life? What are the psychological challenges, the relationship challenges, and the life restructuring challenges that they face when they retire? So that was the driving motivation for this research. And with my colleagues, Lottie Balin, Marcy Crary, Tim Hall, and Kathy Graham, I spent the better part of 10 years doing interviews and survey research and trying to make sense of it all and writing this book so that we can help other people through our discoveries of the research.
Well, and thank you. And yes, I remember the first time we were on the podcast, the progress, that was so fun. And just to give people so many things I love about the book and about the core thesis and what prompted it. Just for those of you, when you read it, what makes it so engaging is you have stars. I love you call them stars throughout the book, sharing their own personal stories, so you can bring that research to life. Because sometimes you can read research, then what's that experience? How does this manifest itself? I love you provide that roadmap throughout and highlight different stars. And for me, it's so interesting. Again, this is what's so fun as I reflect personally, and it prompted lots of reflection. We were just saying before we went live for myself. And as an example, what's really cool, my PhD thesis was on entrepreneurship, and it was the very reason I wanted to pursue it was the experience, the psychological, the emotional aspect, because so much of the evidence was around the financial side and what success looks like. I love that. And that is at the heart and soul of the retirement transition and the retiring journey. And there's so many great exercises in it. Can you talk to us a little bit, and the questions are already coming in, can you talk to us a little bit about the word association exercise that you did? Because I thought that was brilliant. And also, even though many have suggested we need to retire the word retirement, you suggest retiring another word for. So can you unpack? Because I think that's so powerful for all of us, very insightful.
I think it reveals a lot about attitudes toward retiring and people who are retired. So Craig, may I give just a little bit of background on what we did in the research?
Absolutely, please do.
Okay. So you mentioned the stars, the people that we focus on in the book. There were 14 of them, but they were 14 among 120 people we interviewed in this research. So my colleagues and I decided to go for breadth as well as depth. The breadth came from the 120 people, the 120 different perspectives and experiences when we interviewed these folks, and we used more or less the same interview protocol for all of them. We asked them questions about work, career, life, what was meaningful to them. We asked questions about identity and relationships. We asked questions about retirement. So obviously that section on retirement was a big block of the questions that we asked. And we went for breadth in another way, not just covering all these broad topics, but we went for breadth in the people that we interviewed. We did select from the corporations that allowed us to recruit for this study. We selected volunteers who were at least reasonably healthy and at least reasonably financially secure. And the sole reason was what I mentioned earlier. There's lots of abundant research showing that health and wealth can have an outsized impact on people's experiences and thoughts about retiring. We wanted to minimize the effects of health and wealth. We knew we wouldn't get rid of them. We couldn't, but we wanted to minimize those so that we could highlight the psychological and relational and life restructuring issues. So these were knowledge workers, basically, professionals working in salaried positions in successful companies. We selected some people who had retired from those companies, some people who were older adults working in those companies, age 55 plus, more or less, who did not immediately have an intention to retire. They hadn't made the exact retirement decision yet. And we even included some people early in their career. 37 of those 120 were of the millennial generation, and they were, at the time we interviewed them, in their 20s, a few in their early 30s. So we wanted to get perspectives of these different generations. But we're most interested in the 83 older adults that we interviewed. 14 of those people who were still working when we were recruiting had made the retirement decision. They told us they were going to retire within the next year or two. And we asked those folks, hey, how would you feel about us interviewing you repeatedly as you go through this transition? And 14 of these folks did say yes. And those are the ones on whom we have such deep information. So we got the breadth from the 120. We have lots of depth from those 14. We did up to 11 interviews over up to 7 years, starting in pre-retirement with these folks as they went through retirement and into the early years of their retirement life. One of the questions that we asked every single one of those 120 people was a word association game. And we had something like a dozen words. One word was retirement. Another word that wasn't right next to that one was retiree.
Mm.
So we had a lot of interesting responses. We just said, say the first thing that pops into your head when you hear these words, retirement. We found, maybe not surprisingly, the younger folks, the most common response, the most frequent response had to do with worries about money. Yep. And, we know you're in your 20s, you don't know what the Social Security net, the social safety net will be like for your generation when you get to the point in life where you're ready to stop working. And that's totally understandable. But they had other words like unknown, uncertain, and a lot of confusion about. They did have positives like relaxation and beach, stuff like that, but a lot of concerns, mostly about money.
Right.
Among the retirement, the pre-retirement adults, 55 plus, we were kind of shocked and dismayed to see the degree of fear in those word associations that came out from people. The two most frequent responses were scary and never. 55 plus, and you're saying never about retirement. What does that reveal? Yeah, there were positive associations. A number of people, many people said things like relaxation, um, enjoyment, but not as many, not as many as were fearful, and words like unknown, uncertain. So that was very telling to us, and as I said, surprising and dismaying. One reason we both wrote the book, by the way, was to try to relieve that fear, because our discoveries led us to realize that a lot of that fear is unnecessary, unwarranted. Interestingly and very encouragingly, the retired people's word associations were almost exclusively positive to the word retirement. The biggest one was wonderful, wonderful, and relaxation and opportunity and freedom. So that is encouraging, right? The word retiree in our word association game, uniformly, almost uniformly negative associations. Things like, and these are like older adults saying things like, not me.
Right.
And the main association, the most frequent one across all these different age groups, was old. So I think we do need to retire the word retiree. For whatever reason in our culture in North America, that word has negative associations. And I don't know exactly why, but I speculate that it has something to do with ageism, even among those of us who have gray hair. There's a certain degree of ageism here. Yeah.
And I love that. I thought that was just such right away, like it kicks off the book in such a fantastically engaging way where you lay out the different groups, and as you say, very interesting insights that they share and their own views on things. And then to your point, the universal kind of negative association with retiree versus retirement. And also, as you point out, and the link between the attitudes that we have about retirement and how that impacts us as well. So just so much great stuff here. I've got a whole bunch of questions. I'm not surprised. And this is, so thank you, Steve, already for the openness. So Steve said, at the beginning of COVID, it really had a profound impact on me and reflecting on my life and who I am. And now what prompted a decision or question around when to retire. So any advice or guidance around how I can get more comfortable with this question and thinking about this transition? Thank you, Teresa. I can't wait to read your book. Sorry.
Thank you for that question, Steve. It's one of the biggies. And you are not alone in having thoughts of retirement come up during the pandemic. Many older adults experience the same thing. You are confronting, you're asking about what we've discovered as the first task of the 4 big tasks of retiring. And there are tasks to do. Some of them can be enjoyable. Maybe they can all be enjoyable, but you need to engage in them. And that is making the decision about how and when to retire. And we found that at that stage, when you're confronting that question, it can be so helpful to think about yourself and your life structure. And let me explain what we mean by those 2 very important constructs. Yourself is everything important about you as you perceive it. Certainly your most important identities. Steve, you might see as your important identities grandfather, engineer, spouse, community organizer, marathoner, friendly. And think about your most important values. What are the things that mean the most to you in life? What are your current priorities? What are your current needs? For example, you might have physical and psychological and emotional needs at this point in your life that you didn't have even 5 or 10 years ago. Try to take a realistic view of yourself as you are at this point in life. And maybe you could also think about the ideal self that you would like to evolve into if you would like to experience some change. And then think about your life structure, which is just basically everything in your life. Your main activities, the organizations that you're part of, the groups, your main relationships, the places where you spend your time. What are the dynamics going on within that life structure? Which of them are the biggest pieces that occupy the most of your time, your attention, your energy? Where is there conflict in that life structure? And most importantly, how well does that life structure align with that self? If you perceive a great alignment, super. But you may perceive that the alignment isn't so great, and that you may perceive that there's something in that life structure, maybe more than one thing, that doesn't quite suit the self that you are now. And if that's the case, you need to contemplate that and see if you can work up the courage to make a change in that aspect or those aspects of your life structure. And for many people, that means removing career, removing work from the life structure.
Well, and already I've got so many comments saying it's such an awesome answer. Really appreciate the insight. Steve also wrote in, oh, that's fantastic. Really appreciate the encouragement and that I'm not alone. So that's absolutely fantastic.
Totally not alone, Steve.
Yeah.
I myself was confronting all of this at the same time.
Well, and Teresa, what I love, what I find is so inspiring about your a through line in your work. And then also that really comes one of the key things, like I would buy the book for the questions alone. I think you could like there's amazing content. The questions that you pose within the book are amazing. For me, a mantra that I love to orient around is great leadership starts with great self leadership. And I love that that is it's really about, okay, who are you? And then how does that fit into the life structure as you talk about? So it just really challenges us, empowers us to look within and who we are and our values and what we value and then how to orient. There are so many questions. This is awesome. This is really fun to watch. Brenda is saying, one of the things I'm scared about is the last day. Once I've made the decision, I've let people know I'm going to retire next year. Any insights from your research around how I can prepare for that day?
Oh, Brenda, that's such a lovely question because we found that many people dreaded that last day, that it loomed very large for them as they were approaching retirement. There was one person in our research whose organization had a practice of organizing a party on their last day at their particular location, organizing a party in the cafeteria. There would be a nice cake, other refreshments. There would be speeches organized and, toasts to the retiring person and anyone in that company location. And there were a couple thousand people in that location. Anyone could come. And those were usually festive occasions, and many people, as they approached retirement, mentioned to us that they were looking forward to it, but not everyone. And this one guy said, I told them, no, thank you. No party for me. And I asked why. He said, oh, I'm afraid I'll get too emotional. He was afraid that he would choke up and not be able to get through it. This was a man. We think of women as being super emotional, but this was a guy. And we did have some others, men and women in the organization, say that they were nervous about the party. They didn't know how they would react, how they would feel. It turns out that this guy's group, his department, just had a little informal something. Someone brought a cake. It was just in their own office space, and other friends dropped by, other colleagues dropped by during the couple of hours they were holding this, and he loved it. He loved it, and he said, I feel a little silly for being so nervous about that because people had lovely things to say, and I realized I had made a positive difference here. That doesn't mean it's not going to be hard, Brenda. You've got relationships, maybe that you've had for decades among your colleagues. Some of them may be dear friends. You've probably accomplished a lot in your years, in your career, and looking at that coming to an end can bring up a lot of realistic sorrow, and allow yourself to feel that sorrow. But I hope you can also feel that you're kind of putting a bow on a wonderful package of work and contributions that you've made over the years, and now you can put it on the shelf, feel good about it, and move on to something else.
Mm. Well, again, so many positive comments here about great insights. Thank you so much. So important to reflect on. Thank you for acknowledging the sadness that comes with that event. And that's to build on that observation. It's something that I really appreciate, not just that you highlight through the amazing research, and you talked about the breadth and depth, which I thought was just such a powerful combination. And then in the stars that you highlight, you really can kind of get a window into the emotions and recognize how important that is to both inform and guide our journey and what to anticipate around that. I think that's terrific. More questions, just kind of it is stacked. I will do my best to get through them.
Bring them on, Craig.
I know this is. I joked before we started. I said this is probably going to, people are really going to get engaged. Allison said,
Frank, can I say something about you mentioned the stories of the stars, these 14 people.
yes.
We feature generally 2 or 3 stars in each of the chapters. One of the things that I'm so grateful to these 14 people for giving us hours and hours and hours of their time. Each interview was at least 2 hours. And as I said, up to 11 interviews with these people over the years. One of the things I'm so grateful for is the variety in these stories, right? I mean, you're nodding your head. Yeah. We saw many. This is an encouraging, very encouraging discovery. We saw so many different pathways into smooth transitions and satisfying retirement lives. And this was a little bit of a surprise, maybe. And I think one of our most important discoveries, that there is no single best way to retire. Maybe in my heart of hearts, I was starting this research with the notion that we would discover the silver bullet, right? Do these 3 things, folks, and you will have a great retirement life. Well, it's not that simple. That's why it does take work, but it can be so wonderful. So wonderful. Not that it was wonderful for everybody. We had a few of those stars, as you know, who had a very bumpy time.
Yep.
Getting to that satisfying retirement life. All 14 of them did, but it took some a whole lot longer than others, but no single best way to do it.
And I'm so glad we're talking about this, because to me that was one of the, I was also surprised. I was, as a scientist at heart, I'm like, okay, the framework and those kinds of things. And what I love, though, a couple of things. Number one, I love the authenticity of the stories, because as you said, they acknowledge that, hey, there can be bumpy rides around this. So, and let's be mindful. And what I would say, what I found is that I really did find that you found the silver bullet, if you will, around, because what the book does is give you guardrails and questions and structures and exercises to answer that ultimate personal question, which I love. For me, that was like the most so inspiring and so insightful message, that there's no right way to do it. And I have and what I love about the book, it provides the tools to find my answer for my journey. That's why I was so excited to have you on today.
And that is why the subtitle of the book is
Yes.
Creating a Life That Works for You.
Again, I just thought it was so great. Another question from Allison saying, my company offers retirement planning. Any insights from your research around how important it is for me to engage in this type of exercise?
And did you say that this questioner is named Allison?
Allison, yes.
Allison. So Allison, I don't know if you can quickly put in the chat, when you say your company runs programs on planning for retirement, are these around financial planning? Can you just maybe put in the chat yes or no?
Yes, she said yes.
Okay, yeah. That's not surprising to me. Many companies, mid-sized companies and larger, do offer retirement planning programs like that. Some small companies even, to help employees, even young ones, think about planning for their financial future so that they will have that security, that financial security in retirement. Those programs are great, but you know what? They are completely inadequate. We discovered that people really need so much more. We had at least one of our stars, the one we call Christopher, said, I so wish there were people who had traveled this road before me who could share their wisdom on what it's really going to be like. Like, how do I approach structuring my life now? How do I think about my relationships? How do I think about who I'm going to be without my work? Because, a lot of these people, a lot of us, I'm certainly in that camp, identify so strongly with our profession, our work, maybe our team, our organization. And what do we do when that piece of identity is being left behind? So those are the programs that companies need to think about mounting. They need to think about helping people with the kinds of issues that we discovered are so important in this research, and giving them some of the tools that we present in this book. And Craig has mentioned the questions several times. When we were considering how to wrap up each chapter in the book, there are 5 of us co-authors, and man, we discussed everything. Sometimes I wanted to bang my head into the wall. We discussed things so often, but we finally came up with an idea that we all liked, and that was to end the chapter with fruitful questions readers can ask themselves to help them with the issues that we discuss in that chapter.
And it's and again, thank you, so insightful. I really appreciate this conversation more than I can express. I love that, so thank you. And again, why I'm so excited for having this discussion today, and also the exercises that are a part of it. You talked about identity, and I love the identity circles that you had people to draw. And again, I'm going to plan some things for people to go. We may get back to it to check out the book because it's just so powerful. I love this question. Joe has said, this is so timely. I'm really enjoying the conversation. How do I bring my wife into the conversation of retirement? I am both excited and nervous about how to do that effectively. Any insights from your research?
You are not alone either. Many people didn't quite know how to approach the spousal relationship around these issues of retiring. My guess is that your spouse has been thinking about this, even if you haven't been talking about it. So it probably won't be a surprise when you bring up the topic. You may want to have a friend, if you have a couples counselor or a trusted friend, or even one of your adult children, be there to help broker the conversation, help ease the conversation. But I don't think it will be a surprise that you want to talk about this. And be prepared to listen, and be prepared in advance with your own thoughts. What are your own thoughts about what you need at this point in your life? What are the values and priorities and needs and identities that are most important to you what is it about your working life that may make you feel that it's time to end it,
Mm,
if that's true? Or maybe you want that spouse to help you engage in that exploration of what is my life structure, what is our conjoint life structure at this point. Is it working for us to still be in careers, or for me to still be in my career? What can we envision as a possibly closer to ideal life structure? And might that involve either a step down in work or ending work?
mm. Awesome. And again, so many comments. I can't appreciate the engagement that we're having here from the live audience, because I can't even, all of them, there's just so much wonderful positivity and reflection that's happening. And this is, I may have planted or seeded this question, so it got to the top of the list for me. Susan said, I'm really interested to learn more about the exercise of identity circles, because I've learned that my identity is really attached to my work almost completely. And this idea of retiring has sparked some anxiety in me in this conversation. Any thoughts around how I can navigate this strong attachment to my work identity?
Is this Christine, Craig?
It was, yes, Christine.
Christine, we got the idea for this identity circles exercise from a methodology that had been used in a completely different context of research. We thought it was so neat as a way to think about how closely you identify with your work. It seems to me that you already know the answer for yourself, Christine, but I'll describe this exercise for others. So imagine that there are two circles in a horizontal to each other, and they are very far separated. One of these circles is you. That is, as you see, the core person that you are. And one of these circles is work, the work that you do, your job, your profession. If those two circles are very far apart, you do not identify with your work in any way. We will label that A. The next pair of circles that we will label B, those two circles are a little bit closer to each other. You and work are still separate, but they're a little bit closer. They do influence each other. The next pair of circles, C, they're closer still. They're touching, in fact, not overlapping, but touching. And you can see where I'm going. We have 6 pairs of circles. When we get to F, they are right on top of each other. You are your work. You are completely identified with your work. And that was one of the questions we asked people in our interview, and it was very revealing. And we asked other questions to try to get a full picture of how strongly they identified with their work. And we found, not surprisingly, that many people, not all, but many people who gave us E or F as their answer to the identity circles did have difficulty either making the decision to retire or taking on the second task of retiring, which is detaching from work, detaching psychologically from work in particular. Could be really difficult for people who did closely identify with their work. So what do you do with that? If you do very closely identify, are you in for just a terrible time as you try to wrench yourself away from that career? Or are you someone who's going to be still working full time, age 85, because you just can't do it? You can't imagine who you will be without your work. That's not an easy question. And, I can say as a professor, I surely have identified quite closely with my work over the years, with my profession. I believe it can be, well, I know from the research that we did that it can be extremely helpful to explore what other identities you have. It's unlikely that is your sole identity. You may be a sibling, you may be an adult child, You may be a parent, a grandparent. You may be a friend to other people, a neighbor to other people. You may be someone who's viewed as something of a leader in an organization like a church or a civic organization. Think about those identities. Think about which ones are precious to you and how you might invest a little bit more of yourself in enriching those identities. That, for some people in our study at least, that did help them to detach psychologically from their work. For example, there's a person we call Jay who was the highest level you could get in his company. He was a partner in a mid-sized consulting firm. And when asked this, another identity question we asked people was, would you be more likely to say that your work is what you do or your work is who you are? And he very quickly said, oh, who I am. This was shortly before he retired. He recognized that this was going to be a challenge. This detaching from work was going to be a challenge from him. And there were many reasons that led him to decide he did need to retire in his early 60s. About 6 months before he retired, he went half-time with, the understanding of his partners in the firm. He went half-time and he began to re-engage with an old identity of his, and that was being a hot rodder. This may sound hilarious that a partner in a consulting firm wanted to be a hot rodder, but this had been a passion of his when he was a teenager and a young adult. He loved customizing, well, they were junky old hot rods when he was that age, and riding in rallies and races and just being part of this hot rod community of people who like to tinker with their hands and build stuff and race cars and show off their cars to each other and that kind of thing. He recognized that it was a dormant identity, a long dormant one, but he wanted to revive it. And he invested time and energy those 6 months before he fully retired. He bought himself a hot rod, a nicer one this time, and started customizing it in his garage, and loved working on it, loved hanging out in the garage with in a local garage with other people who were doing the same thing with their cars, becoming part of that community. And he said, you know what, this may be my new community after I retire. And you know what, Christine, it did become his community. It still took him a while to detach psychologically from his work. And he did continue to do a little bit of contract work for his firm when they begged him to do it. He did continue to do a little bit of work. So that helped him to ease the transition. But I'd say he had more or less closed down that work identity, what he called working Jay.
Right.
In 2 or 3 years after retiring, and you can do it too.
Well, and that's what again, so much, and there's so many great comments coming in continuously. It's one of the many things that I just really took out of it is that this is a journey, this is a process. So you retire on date X. It's not, oh, okay, tomorrow. It's retiring. I love that was a purposeful title for the book. It's a transition. And I also love, because I think it's so powerful for all of us, is to think about our identity or identities as you talk about, and then where do we invest time, energy, reflection on those different identities. Oh, I just got a great comment from Greg saying, wow, mic drop moment for sure. The difference between is work who I am or what I do. Thank you. So that's awesome.
Great.
And it is, there are moments like this throughout the book where you just kind of stop for a moment and go, okay, that I have to spend some time with this. I have to think about these all too important questions, because otherwise how we answer it has such a profound implication, not just on today, tomorrow, and the next day, and the years after that. It's just fantastic. I've got another question as well from Bill, who said, I'm realizing I have very few interests and activities outside of work Is that something I should be paying attention to? And how can I go about finding some life outside of the office?
Bill, you are talking about the third task of retiring of this process. Wow, it's like
It's
you
almost chronological.
like you've set this up for me, Craig.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, this is the third task, which is experimenting and exploring for elements of the provisional retirement life that you will have in the early weeks and months and maybe years of your retirement, until you have been able to explore and experiment enough that you feel like, okay, these are the elements that I want to settle into. I want to consolidate my retirement life into a more settled rhythm and routine around these activities, these relationships, these places to spend my time. It kind of depends, Bill, on what stage of life you're at. If you're in early career, mid career, you've got plenty of time to do this exploration and experimentation. What interests you? There might be things that you think interest you, and when you dip your toe into them, you discover, not quite me, not quite me. But my guess is that your intuition will guide you to one or two things that will strike a chord, and you probably won't be able to invest a lot of time in them if you are mid-career, because we're super busy as professionals. Many of you I know are executives, but just get familiar enough with these activities and with the communities around these activities so that you can begin to invest more in them as you go get closer to retirement, and then it will feel very natural, and the transition is likely to feel a lot smoother for you. If you're in later career, say your 50s, your 60s, you might think, as Jay did, about, what interested me when I was younger? What did I really enjoy when I was younger? Or is there a foregone identity that I never really got to explore? Maybe you dreamed of being a musician and dabbled a little bit with musical instruments when you were a kid, and then just kind of let it go. Maybe even were in a band or something in high school. Explore that again. Let yourself take on that beginner's mind and try to get back into it. See how it feels. See if you enjoy it. Maybe you like singing. Join a choral group that doesn't require a lot of your time right now, but you can begin to invest more in as you go through the next few years. Um, Maybe you like to think about an entrepreneurial venture for yourself that you want to take on or join other people in after your career. Maybe the nonprofit that you've been really attracted to, that you really admire, and you could get involved as a part-time volunteer now, maybe step up into a leadership position after you retire if you find that it's really calling to you. So there are a number of things you can do well before retirement to engage in this third task of retiring. You can do this exploration, experimentation, way before you deeply engage in that first task of deciding when and how to retire. These tasks do not have to be done in a particular sequence, and they're often not.
well, and again, and thank you, and so many comments coming through. And I think for me, what's awesome again, it's that it as we contemplate that transition, what it does is allow us to ask some really great questions that you've talked about. And what I love too about the questions are framing them in the space of what's possible. And then also, as you and your colleagues just so beautifully point out throughout, it's going back and kind of maybe pulling some older identities forward or past interest. It's thinking about who am I now and what might be new pathways that I want to. And what I really appreciate, and that's again why I think it's such a timely and important read, no matter where we are, is it really gets us thoughtfully engaging in our life story, the context in which we operate, and who we share this space with. I think it's just absolutely terrific. I have another question from Aaron. So saying, can I think about this too early?
No, I don't think so.
It's,
I mean, you know, if you're in your 20s, you've probably been thinking about retirement in terms of money, because that is what most young people think about when they think about retirement for themselves, if only because their parents have been nagging them to start a retirement account. The earlier you start, young woman, young man, the better off you'll be, which is true, honestly. But yeah, think about who are the friends and the family members that you would love to grow old with,
mm,
and nurture those relationships. Hold on to those relationships, even if it takes some work when you're no longer living in the same dorm room or in the same city. Uh, Nurture those relationships, and um, think about the activities that you enjoy now that you might want to invest in some way that you can build on throughout your life. And yeah, you know, your work identity, your identity is probably closely identified with your work if you are investing a lot of yourself in your career right now. That's entirely natural for a young professional, but don't let that be your only identity. Nurture other aspects of self and always keep those flames burning, even if they're minor pilot lights in comparison to the huge flame that's your career. Keep them going. Don't let them die out.
I love that. That's definitely a mic drop quote from so many in this episode. And again, so many comments coming through. And to me, I'm so glad this question was asked, because how I engaged with the book, and I'd love to get your take on this, Teresa, is that I really felt like no matter where you are, the content, even though it's talking about retiring, it shines a light on things that apply no matter where we are in our journey. And these are things that we can, and the earlier we reflect on them, think about them, engage intentionally, the better we will be in creating a life that works for us, if that's a fair extension.
Yes, and in fact, Craig, this reminds me of one really important point that I'd love everyone to hear. We we believe that the discoveries we've made in this book can be applied fruitfully to any major life transition, not just retirement. Yes, there are certain aspects that are probably unique to the retirement transition, but so much of it applies to other transitions, like making the transition from college to career, making career transitions, whether promotions that you're offered or new jobs within an industry, or you deciding to make a leap to a different industry. Or maybe they are involuntary changes in your career. Maybe you're downsized out of your organization, or you decide that you need to leave your organization for whatever reason. Those transitions can all be helped by, oh, let me mention another big one: getting married
Right.
and becoming a parent.
Kids. Yep.
So the 4 tasks are making the decision to do it. Yes, some things are involuntary. Some of these life transitions are involuntary, but many are voluntary. We make a decision. How do we approach that decision? The second task is detaching from what came before. And yeah, you know, when you go from college to career, there are parts of yourself that you need to let go of. And when you become a parent, holy cow, are there parts of yourself, like the need for sleep, that you need to let go of, at least temporarily? And then the third task of exploring and experimenting with new elements of life, new ways of structuring your life. And finally, consolidating a rhythm and a routine that works for you. I think the questions that we have at the end of the chapters can be helpful questions no matter what kind of transition you're going through. And we have four guiding skills that we encourage people to develop and exercise as they go into the retirement transition. And I think they apply to any life transition. The first A is alignment. Remember, I talked earlier about looking to align yourself as you are now and your life structure. And you can best achieve that alignment with the second A, awareness. Develop that awareness of self. We talked about a few exercises you can do to develop a deep awareness of your identities and your needs and your priorities. And there are more in the book. And develop an awareness of your life structure as it really is right now and the dynamics in that life structure. And that will help you see alignment or areas of misalignment. The third A is agency, and that is proactively making moves. When you perceive a misalignment, making a move to change one or more things in that life structure, or possibly change something about yourself, which is, as we know, often harder to do. And the fourth A is adaptability. So necessary, because you know what? It's not just that self influences life structure, but life structure influences self in a big way. And we saw a constant interplay throughout the retirement transition with self influencing life structure, and life structure, whether because of a change you've made in it, it affects you, or because of something going on that you have no control over. Your adult child just had a kid. That's not something you control, but boy, it's likely to impact your life in a big way. And a global pandemic happens. Hey, folks, we got to adapt to it because we do not control it. So that is the fourth and very important A.
Well, and I couldn't, like, we're just perfectly docking the ship, if you will, on this. I can't believe it's an hour, personally. This has just been so interesting and engaging, and we could keep going. And what I love, as you were sharing this and talking about the applicability of what you found, as you say, it's a transitional framework no matter where we are. I was smiling and beaming because that's how I really engage. So, and I got so many comments saying, I'm buying the book sounds awesome. And I cannot recommend it enough, because it does, even though the focus is on retiring and has this applies everywhere. And the thoughtfulness which we do that is so of paramount importance. And again, love the 4 A's of alignment, awareness, agency, and adaptability. Talk about vital skills that are going to become increasing. They're essential today and more important each passing day. So Teresa, this has just been absolutely amazing. An honor, a privilege. It's been so fun to speak with you. Thank you for taking time out of your incredibly hectic schedule to join us. And you had an amazing response at lunch, which I'm not surprised. Any final words before we close our conversation today?
Don't be afraid of retiring. I'd love to do that word association game again and find much more positive responses among our older adults. It can be a wonderful, wonderful time of life, all kinds of new possibilities. And I wish everyone in this audience well. I loved the questions from the audience and from you, Craig. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, this has just been absolutely awesome. Cannot wait for this episode to go live. And for those of you listening, please like, share, comment, make your suggestions. Always appreciate hearing from the Do Good to Lead Well community. Until next time, bye for now. Been a real pleasure. Thanks again, Teresa.